there's some alligator in somebody's swimming pool or something. Are they really all over the place? I said, oh my God, it's a jungle out here.
Yeah, you gotta look in your house before you walk in, because they might be. There was a story somebody found one in their kitchen, I guess.
But yeah, you're right. You know, you can be influenced so easily and not know the real deal until you experience it for yourself.
So the real deal. That's that's important. I'm going to one more time go back to take a look at the moment of choice in the tree of life versus the tree of knowledge of good and evil, or like I like to refer to it, the tree of life and the tree of death. Because the death experience that was promised comes about when we embrace the concept of good and evil. I know we already jumped onto the journey home.
Yep.
Right?
Yes.
But we're going to go back to the moment of choice, because I wanted to introduce something that I got off the off the internet, and it's right out of the Bible. And anyone who was raised Catholic may recall the way this is phrased, because this is the creed. The creed. Well, it's the creed for the Catholic Church. And it starts off with this. I'm only going to read the beginning because I think it ties all this together. We believe in one God.
Creator of heaven and earth.
Wait a minute. Yep. Okay, right there. Yeah. See, we all know that, right? The Father, the Almighty, the maker of heaven and earth, of all that is seen and unseen. Now, let's look at that just for a moment. Let's say this is what they say they believe. We believe in one God. Well, there's one God, there's one universal consciousness, the creator of everything that exists. And there is nothing that exists that is not part of that or coming from that. Right? The seen and the unseen.
Right.
What would be left?
But they only believe in one Catholic church.
Well, let's not get into that part yet. Let's stay at the beginning. Okay, let's just stay at the beginning part. Let's just talk about one universal consciousness that is the creator of everything that is seen and unseen.
When Jews came up with that was a pretty radically new idea.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, what is Islam based on? What do they say? What did Muhammad say? And what is the basis of Islam?
A God, right?
He said there is. I forget exactly how it goes. Whatever they say. But it all translates to, there is only one God.
Yeah.
Right? That's the translation. There's only one God. Well, here the Catholic is basically saying there's only one God.
Yep.
Right? And if we look at the Bhagavad Gita and we start looking at the Hindu tradition, we see that they talk about Krishna.
I want to interrupt for a minute. Do you know that they're building a Hindu temple in Fort Myers?
I didn't know that, no. But if we look at that and we say, okay, there's the Hindu faith, and they're saying, basically, Krishna is the universal consciousness. All right, it doesn't matter what label we put on it. Let's just say, what are we looking at here? We're looking at one universal consciousness. Christians are going to call it God. Hindus are going to call it Krishna. The Muslims are going to call it Allah. The Indians might say the Great Spirit. But the point being, we've got a universal consciousness that was the creator. That's all this really was. What I wanted to kind of drive home was the fact that we have a formless consciousness that created all form, because the formless consciousss is the unseen, and created the seen, which is matter, which is energy, which is whatever we see. Okay? But this creator is both. It's the seen and the unseen. According to Catholics, they believe that. According to the other traditions, I believe they believe that also. So, when we look at our tree of life, there's life. That universal consciousness, that's life. That's the tree of life. That's what that represents. Then we have an alternative to that. The alternative is the tree of knowledge of good and evil, or dualistic view. We're separating things. We're separating that which can't really be separated. Okay? God being everything that exists, right? I mean, you can't separate it into different aspects and say it's this and this when it's really the whole. We talked last week about opposite poles of the same thing. Hot and cold. Hot and cold are opposite ends of something, a temperature. The temperature is this or it's this, but ultimately it's the temperature. So when we're talking about good and evil, we're splitting up and we're seeing something in dualistic terms, when in reality you can't split something into dualistic terms because it is all. Now, off of the internet again, I got something.
Oh, you're not going to go through the whole thing? Because I thought
I got something from Isaiah.
interesting.
Isaiah 45:7. Now this is God speaking, right? And Isaiah wrote down what God said.
Okay.
And God said this: I form the light and create darkness. I make peace and I create evil. Interesting. Now this is God talking. He didn't say I create the good and Satan's out there creating the evil. This is God speaking according to Isaiah. I make peace and I create evil. I, the Lord, do all things. Didn't say with the exception of this or that. All things. Interesting. So,
That's why I go, how do you know God is love?
well, now let's look at love. Let's look at love. There's a book. I guess it's Watkins. Is it Watkins? I'm not sure. The book is called The Eye of the Eye. And a woman gave me this book. She read my first book and gave me this book. She had it mailed to my house for me to read. So I said, oh, if it came to my house, I guess somebody went through the trouble of mailing it to me. I better read it. Well, I read it, and I felt very, very comfortable with what was being presented. And in there, this gentleman talked about love. And what he said was, love is not an emotion. Mistakenly in this world, we see it as an emotion. It's not an emotion.
Yeah.
Love is a level of awareness.
Love, say that again?
Love is a level of awareness.
Oh,
That's love.
Yeah,
Love is
good
not
way
an
to say it.
emotion.
Yeah.
Now, let's see how that works out. When we look at our tree of life, is our tree of life, which is also synonymous with love. Love and life, God, all one. This is God, right? So we have the tree of life, which is love, which is not split in dualistic terms as good and evil. It's one. It's a universal consciousness. It's everything. Now let's look at it in a different light. Let's throw our blinders on and try to interpret it. Now let's try to interpret it and see it as good and evil. Wow, it's a whole different picture. So now, from the human perspective, not from the spiritual, but from the human perspective, love is going to have a whole different meaning. Because it's going to be based upon our perceptions. It's going to be based upon our judgments. Not upon our level of awareness, but upon our judgments. You see how there's different states here going on. Now, I said when we're done with this book, we're going to get into the Course in Miracles. A little bit. I'm not going to read this whole book. I'm not going to get into this whole thing. There's no way. There's too much to this. And I would say if you guys want to get into it yourself somewhere, that would be great. But me, personally, I don't want to get into this whole thing. It's just years. It's years. And I don't want to spend years.
Yeah.
Anyway, I don't even know where it is in here, but somewhere in the introduction, it talks about what the Course is about. And it says this: that which is real cannot be threatened.
Cannot be what?
Threatened. That which is real cannot be threatened. That which is unreal does not exist. Now, herein lies the peace of God. That's what the Course is all about. To me, the Course is about this. Experiencing life and experiencing the death experience. A or B. That's it. That's what this whole book is about, The Course in Miracles, if you looked at it. It's about being awake or being asleep. And the book talks about having a transition in the way you interpret things. Either you perceive things or you experience them. The perception is always going to be an erroneous picture. It's always going to be wrong. Perception. Because perception is going to be filtered through a intellectual thinking mind. Okay? The moment you analyze it and judge it dualistically as good and evil, you're going to have the death experience. Okay. Now, how long will this last? When does it end? Where can you go with it? Well, you've got eternity to play. All right? You have all of eternity. We have, all of us have all of eternity. Time is endless.
You know, was Adam eating what? What was he supposed to be eating, the apple?
He ate the apple according to...
And he's the one who took the first step into that.
So she ate it first and then talked... No.
Yeah, but you know, this, like Adam and Eve, they're, all of a sudden they're saying, ooh, I'm different from you.
Yeah.
I'm unique. Holy moly, I'm unique.
They judged him.
Well, just
And then you can start asking questions about what does this mean? What can I do with it? And there you go. Off and on your way.
it's like Bruce says, before it happened,
Huh?
before, you know, they had the forbidden fruit, they didn't notice any difference from God. And then as soon as they did,
Exactly, see?
now they were naked.
Yeah.
Now they're naked. Now fear comes into play. Before that, fear didn't exist.
Yeah.
Fear was not even a consideration. Fear did not exist.
Yep.
And that's why this Course in Miracles says, only the love is real. And it says fear is an illusion.
Yeah.
So
Fear is an
why,
illusion.
we didn't go through everything that the Bible said in that particular...
No, we
Why
didn't get into all of it.
Why did he say it the way he did then?
Why did who say what? Why did God say that?
Mm-hmm.
Isaiah, yeah.
Why did Isaiah say that? Now, look at it this way. Here we are. We have life. Then we have the death experience. Now, if you look at this diagram on the page, the death experience doesn't end at just viewing the tree of knowledge of good and evil. What it does do is it starts you on a journey.
Yes.
Okay? And it starts you on a journey.
Physical
Now,
world.
remember that story, or that saying that says, when in Rome, you do as the Romans do?
Mm-hmm.
Well, within the death experience, you do as those that are dead. If you choose to judge, there is a whole system that you're going to play in.
Yeah.
And you're not in charge of that system. That system is in charge of you. You are capable of choosing to go down there and play that, or you're choosing to withdraw from that. If we go to a basketball game, we don't bring a baseball bat. Doesn't apply here, right? But if you go to a basketball game, you play by the rules that are assigned to that game. If you choose to have a human experience, if you choose to judge, you will play by the rules that are applicable to that choice you made. We'll all be subject to cause and effect, right? Karma. You'll be playing in now. In the now moment, the past, the present, the future is now, right?
Okay, yeah.
In terms of eternity,
Yeah.
let's talk about eternity. In terms of eternity, the past, the present, and the future are always now. However, later on in the book, I said God created a perpetual system that will go infinitely within the eternal moment. What does all that mean? I said, wow, if everyone got that, We would close the book and we're done. I said this, the perpetual system is the past, the present, and the future, meaning linear time. Linear time can go on infinitely.
Yeah.
And we can keep experiencing over and over and over and over and over and over again. We can choose to be within time. Time and space. This is where all the dimensions come into play. We have the ability to choose it. God gave us free will. As far as Adam and Eve choosing what we're going to experience, no. Adam and Eve has no control or to say what anyone else is going to experience, but we decide for ourselves. Who's Adam and Eve? We all are.
Thank you.
We're all making the choice, every one of us, in this moment.
None of us are smart enough to ask a question.
We're asking questions, but we're all asking the wrong ones.
Yeah.
We're not asking the right questions. You know, when it says, knock and the door will be open, seek and ye shall find, you're going to find, we all will find. Because God is unconditional love. There is nothing that anyone could possibly ask for in earnest that would not be answered. However, there is always the dualistic approach to things when we choose to have the human experience. When we choose to judge, we will be playing with two different mindsets, if you will. One is awake, one is asleep. One is spiritual, one is ego. And these are at odds with one another. Okay? Our Christian backgrounds would tell us we have the devil on one side, we have the angel on the other, which is kind of true within the framework of this dimension. You do have positive and negative in this dimension, yes. But there is something that's greater than that. There is the awakened state. There is unconditional love. Right? This is where we began. We all began in unconditional love because that's what God is. That's what our Creator is. Remember, God is the seen and the unseen. Everything that exists. Well, if everything that exists comes from an unconditionally loving being, what's not unconditionally loving?
Conditioned people.
So this is where the Course in Miracles would say, anything that is not unconditional love is an illusion. I don't buy that shit. Come on. You can't tell me that. Look at this world.
Look around. You
Look
can
around.
See it every day.
You see every day, right? You see all these people. Well, this is what the Course is saying. Now, this is why a lot of people haven't embraced that Course as being true, because we have such a strong attachment to what we want to believe, what we see. And only our senses, usually, is what we rely on to give us validation. I want validation. Don't hand me all this stuff about this abstract, unconscious, formless being. Show me. Where's the face? Where, you know, God's got to have the long
Looks
beard.
like it.
So that's our problem. Our problem is that once in this dimension, our senses have come and they take over. And our senses is what we use to validate what is true and not true. I mean, it is what it is. I can only say this. It's in meditation. And I know we've all touched on meditative states at one time or another, whether we call it meditation or prayer. When we quiet the mind, when we withdraw our attention from day to day, from the thinking mind, we can open the door. And we do open the door. And we have another experience that transcends this limited thought.
Okay, so Isaiah is putting down that stuff from his meditation.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
And that's what he came up with that day, or that morning, or whatever.
Which is where he happened to be in that moment.
That's where he was at that moment.
Why not?
Exactly. And
Now,
because when you go into the Psalms, you get some more. You get a lot of other meditations, and they come off looking at something differently in there because somebody else wrote them. Yeah.
anybody ever go on vacation?
No.
I think we've all been on vacation, right?
Yeah.
She's never, she has?
She does.
She does, she goes?
I drag him.
She drags him. When you're on vacation, do you feel like you're at home?
Uh-uh.
Uncomfortable.
You're uncomfortable?
Yeah,
Exciting?
Not your bed, not your food, not your...
It's not home.
Yeah, no.
In other words, it's something other than home. But you're experiencing it,
Yes.
Yeah.
right? It's a temporary state that you're experiencing.
Yeah, that moment happy, enjoy.
Mhm.
That's for the vacation for.
And if you didn't go on vacation and you stayed home, you'd still be experiencing.
Yes.
You-
Yeah,
you
yeah,
start-
something, yeah, different.
But wouldn't it be different?
If you went on vacation,
It's going to be different.
yeah.
Yeah. An adventure.
It's an adventure.
Mhm.
You wouldn't be home stewing in your own juices.
Let's call
Right.
the death experience.
Oh.
An adventure.
ANC.
A and C?
ANC.
Ah, whatever.
What, an adventure? ADVEN? TURE. There you go.
Okay,
Yeah.
so the death experience is an adventure. Let's call it that. All right?
Mhm.
I've never attached it, I haven't attached the two words, but that's, yeah.
No, we haven't, right? But let's go back to the Garden of
That
Eden.
makes sense, yeah.
All right? God says you have life, you have a choice of life, or you have a choice of death. Remember? He said, if you eat of the tree of knowledge, you're going to die.
You're gonna die, yeah.
Okay.
Now, he told Adam and Eve that, but guess what? That applies to all of us,
Yeah.
right? Not just Adam and Eve, it applies to us. So if you choose to see things as good and evil,
Then you'll die 1,000 deaths.
you're going to die more than 1,000.
Well, you know.
Yeah, almost infinite deaths.
I only have one
Yeah.
life.
Yeah, okay?
Okay.
But here's what that death experience is. It's seeing things as good and evil. You're going to have a death experience. The death experience is an adventure.
Yeah.
You're having it. Look out. Look. Who do you see in this world that's not having the death experience? Who's not seeing good and evil? Point that person out to me. Bring them in here. I'd love to meet the person who is not seeing that.
No, you weren't saying that, okay, you're saying death is an adventure,
Mhm.
but the adventure is not good and evil.
No, it's choosing.
It's the
to see things
experiencing.
Good and evil.
It's experiencing good and evil.
Choosing to see things.
You're
good and
choosing to
evil.
see it. You're interpreting it that way. This is based on perceptions.
Yep.
Now, perceptions. One thing that's interesting is, I'm going to put over here love on this side, and we're going to put over here fear belongs on this side. And it says this in the Bible. God is love, and God is that which never changes.
Okay, fine.
Okay? This never changes. Did you ever see how you judge somebody in something and it changes?
Yeah. If it's not validated or it's proved wrong. that'll
Eventually,
change.
almost every
That'll
thought we
change.
have that's based on a judgment, we find at some point
Yeah,
I was
sure.
wrong.
Yeah.
You know, almost always. So we're having an adventure at looking at things in terms of judging it, and it's changing all the time. As a matter of fact, I've said this many, many times. In this dimension, there's only one thing you can count on.
Change.
100, change. It's coming.
Oh,
Change is coming.
Yeah, okay, good, yeah.
Has to. Don't like something? Well, it'll change. Might not change the way you like it, but it's going to change. And eventually, it's going to be
To like it or
ending.
to not like it is one thing, but just to let it be would be non-judgmental.
No matter what happens, it's going to change regardless, right?
Why couldn't you let a death experience just be adventure, period? Without
Because
any
it's
of
so
the
much
other,
more.
without any of the other negativities attached to it that we're stuck with in this realm.
Well, now this is one of the reasons why I read this about what Isaiah said, what God said. I make peace and I create evil. You see, Without having the dualistic experience, you're not going to have an adventure anyway. You're not going to be in this. You're not going to be able to judge if you don't have dualistic viewpoint. If you don't have opposite poles, then you can't judge it.
Don't
At
judge.
that point, you're just being.
At that point, you're just being, and you're going to have a different experience.
Right.
Yeah.
Now,
Which is where we're
now
going
you're going to
to
be
get.
experiencing life. You're going to experience that tree of life, which is the other picture. You're going to have this, or you're going to have that. It's A or B.
We're trying to get to the fruitful tree.
Doug, you missed a lot of months. You missed a lot of months. You do realize when Bruce says death experience, he's not talking about physically dying.
I think Doug knows we're not
No,
talking
I
about
don't
the
think so
physical
at this
death.
point.
We're talking about going on vacation. That's what we're
by
talking
death,
about.
That is,
means-
yeah, see.
See, he didn't mean by physically dying. He meant
Spiritually.
Being away from God,
spiritually.
separate from
That you're,
God.
yes, not living unconditionally loving. So he said he's missed a lot of months, and I could tell he missed what you were saying by that.
Okay,
Okay,
have to hear
okay.
that.
Yeah,
also.
we're talking about a spiritual death. We're talking
Because
about
I'm looking at death not from the point of view of fear at all, but wahoo, where we are now. Here.
well, look where we are now. Exactly. Look at this world,
Yeah.
and look at what we can play with. Look at what we can create. Now, when we choose this death experience, as I said earlier, God created a system for us to play in. There's a system. There is a system within the dimension that we find ourselves in where death is at the top, meaning, I'm going to put up here spiritual death.
Which is just a
That
separation,
sounds like an
something that.
oxymoron too, but okay.
So-
Spiritual
that
death
makes
meaning
you
You
this.
missed a lot. I wish
Okay.
you were here over the months.
All right,
So
okay.
good.
Here we go, Doug.
What?
Let's put over here awake
Yep,
Yeah.
and asleep.
Sleep.
there you go.
Okay, you did that, yeah.
Okay?
Yeah.
Now, in the sleeping state, we all can dream,
Okay.
right? We've all had dreams at night, and we all have our nightmares during the day.
Amen.
All right? I mean, not necessarily that we have a nightmare during the day, but you can have a nightmare during the day. It can be more frightening than when you're sleeping.
Oh,
Sometimes,
heck yeah.
oh, please, let me go to sleep. I want to forget about the day, right? So, but the point is, when you see things in terms of dualistic viewpoint, you are asleep to the true picture of the spirit. Okay? Now it's making more sense, getting clearer, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
When you use the analogy of going on vacation and the death experience is an adventure versus staying at home, it just seems like, for me, I have to go on vacation. I have to have those adventures. Otherwise, life isn't worth living. Are you saying that we need that death experience? We need that, it is like an adventure that we need to take?
Let me say this. You need
That we
the
would be- We'd be
experiences.
bored without it?
Let me say you need the experiences when you've chosen to judge. You'll need to have experiences which will afford you the opportunity to reassess. Okay?
I think you missed what he was saying.
Now I understand what he was saying.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I understand what he was saying. And when you do come to back to the awakened state, you'll find that you will experience something that was far greater than this. And no, you won't be bored. No. And as a matter of fact,
I mean, if you never went on vacation, never traveled,
Right.
just those adventures, that would seem not to be desirable.
it would seem so, wouldn't it? Based upon our judgmental minds.
Yeah.
Yeah, but when you come to the awakened state, you're going to experience something that goes beyond the judgmental mind.
And I think that's what's hard for us.
It is hard for us.
We never
That's
experienced
exactly why
the
it's
awakened
difficult.
state, or we don't recall experiencing the awakened state. So therefore, it's like,
Yeah, exactly.
how do I know I'm going to enjoy it? Why should I focus on that?
I've had people, many times, people have come to me and say, well, I might read your book, but what's in it for me? I want something in it for me. And I can only tell you this, and I know you've had experiences when you meditated. right? When you feel that vibration in your meditation, was it real? Did you feel the substance of it? Was it real?
Yes, but I've never experienced in a meditation like you have.
No,
I've
no,
never
not
been
necessarily.
near that.
No, and that's irrelevant. It
But as
doesn't.
in-
Well, each of us is going to have our own unique experiences,
Right.
and we will. Those can be amplified, and they do get amplified as you start moving more and more in that direction. Just as the first time you had a meditation, most of the time, and I've expressed this many times, when I started meditating, I sat in a chair frustrated night after night, nothing was going on. What's happening? I'm sitting here, I feel like a fool. Nothing's happening night after night after night. And then boom, you have something, wow, that was different. Then you have something else, wow, that was more profound than before. Wow, that was more and more and more. And it builds. As we shift, the doors open to greater and greater. And I equate this, good example is a bodybuilder. The first time you pick up those weights, you can't lift too much. But you build the muscle, oh, little more, little more, little more, little more. Before you know it, Arnold Schwarzenegger. No, but you have to work at something to develop that.
Right.
And we all have to, unfortunately, we all have a job to do. We all have a job to do. Whether we accept it or reject it does not change the fact that we all have a job to do. Because we find ourselves in this dimension. Is this our natural state?
No.
It's not. It's not our natural state. So we have to discern, in some way, we have to discern. How did we get here? You know, they say if you take a dog on a trip somewhere, you take a dog on vacation. I've seen this on some special somewhere. You take a dog on vacation, and then somehow you forget the dog and then drive home. You know, and the dog 30 miles away from its home finds its way home. Right? Mm-hmm. Somehow it found its way. Okay? We've all heard that? Mm-hmm. Right? Well, how do we find our way home if this is not our home?
Coming here.
Coming here. Well, there's truth everywhere in this world. There is. And that's why the section that we're just moving into this week, which we started on last week, the journey home. That's where we happen to be right now. How appropriate. How do we have to get here? You know? But the journey home. In order for us to get home, we have to know where our home is, first of all, and how did we get to where we are. Unlike that dog, I would dare say that if we got all blindfolded, they put us on a train, bring us someplace, I don't know, Timbuktu. I actually hear that that's a real place. I think it's in Africa somewhere. But anyway, they bring us to Timbuktu and drop us off. How do we get home? Where are we? You know, we'd be very, very confused because we didn't see our way. We would have an advantage of knowing where our home is, yes. But the journey home for our spirit, we have to look and say, well, what's going on here? If this isn't our home, why are we here? What brought us here? So that's what we're going to really get into. That's what this is about. Life is infinite. As spirit, you can't die. No one can. We can experience death. That's what goes on in our judgmental minds. We believe in it. And as we believe in it, we experience it. And we can feel the pain and suffering of our loved one just passed. Oh my God, I'll never see them again. And they meant so much. How am I ever going to live? And da-da-da-da. So death is a real experience in this dimension. But if life is infinite, death can't be. Death can't exist. And it doesn't. It does in the dream state, it does in this dimension. But this dimension is not our home. So the journey home is, what is home? And how do we get back there? Anyway, let's jump back into the book a little bit, and then we'll see if this starts making any more sense. Looking back, here's where we left off. I guess it's on page 26, 28, the second paragraph. Looking back at where we left off in Genesis, you might see why there is such confusion. According to our story, Adam and Eve were at home in Eden without a care in the world. Remember our story? They had no cares, no problems.
Yep.
The next moment, they found themselves in such fear that Adam hid when he heard God's voice. It seems that their new home had radically changed for the worse. Love was replaced by fear, and guilt and shame became the predominant energies. Right? Didn't it happen? According to our story, it did. The Lord, not wanting this fallen state, living in ego to become a permanent condition, drove them out of the garden and placed an angel with a flaming sword to keep them from the tree of life. That's in the Bible. I didn't make this up. Okay? I don't know if you ever read this story, but that's the way the story reads. They ate of the tree of knowledge of good and evil. They died. God says, get the hell out of here. And don't you dare go near that tree of life. And he placed the angels there to guard it so they can't go near it. I didn't make it up. So read it for yourself. It's in there.
Okay. Interesting stories in that book.
Huh?
Right now, in the Bible are interesting stories.
Very interesting. But
that get misinterpreted.
they do get misinterpreted, but you know, there's a reason for that story.
Yeah.
As everything has a reason, there is a reason. Some might ask, why did God keep them from eating the tree of life? By driving them out of the garden, he was protecting them from transforming their temporary state of separation into a permanent condition. Now imagine, they're having the death experience. We just said, is this real? No. You don't want to make this permanent condition for all of eternity, however people are choosing it. Okay? It's a choice. It's a choice to have this experience. So God's not going to make that a permanent condition. It's not. It's a choice we made, and we can undo the choice we made. We can choose again. Any moment. Any moment you can choose again.
Yeah, but if he was keeping them out.
From eating of the tree of life.
Right.
Yeah. Why?
Yeah, I mean, what if they wanted to make the change in a couple of days or so?
Now again, remember, we're talking about metaphors here.
Yeah.
Okay? We're talking about metaphors. And the tree of life and the tree of knowledge of good and evil is a choice to make. Okay? So, yes, even though our story says that God was protecting the tree of life and you can't eat of this, and it was to keep them from making their erroneous life, their illusionary life, into a permanent condition. Later in the Bible, and I can't tell you I've read the whole thing, I've read bits and pieces here and there, but later in the Bible it talks again about the tree of life at the end. Right? Doesn't it? In Revelations, it talks about the tree of life again.
Revelation.
Yeah.
He's read that much.
Anyway, if you go from one end of the Bible to the other end of the Bible, you're going to hear about the tree of life being reintroduced. Okay? And what's happened is the Bible is depicting the journey that mankind is on relative to the choice they made. Okay? That's what it's about. And within the death experience, even though, like the Course in Miracles says, it's not real. Time and space is not real. Einstein said time and space is an optical delusion of consciousness. But he also said, albeit a persistent one. It's a very persistent delusion. And it belongs to this dimension. It belongs to the frequency of anyone who's choosing to see things in dualistic terms. Okay? Linear time belongs here. It's the game. It's where we chose to come. It's what we chose to experience. You don't have to stay. You can choose again. But if you don't make a conscious choice,
Now, when you say you don't have to stay,
you don't have to stay.
you don't,
You can choose something different. Now,
You
Let
can
me
choose
say
something
this.
different by choosing to be non-judgmental in this while you're here. Otherwise, I mean, you can't commit suicide to get out of it.
No way.
So you are choosing to stay. I mean, you have to choose to not be judgmental, is what you're saying.
Here we are.
Yeah.
You have to choose not to be judgmental, exactly. Here you are. Now, ego would define this moment. Each of us is very good at using our intellect and painting a picture for ourselves. Right? I'm Bruce, I'm a father, former businessman, yada, 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 all this stuff. There I am. Okay. Now, that's ego. Now I have a spirit which is untouched, my spirit, because it's perfect. It was a perfect creation of God. It was, is, will always be. I don't know about you, no, the rest of you too. No, we all have a part of ourselves which is pure and untouched that no one can touch. No one can, now or forever. That's why the Course in Miracles says, that which is real cannot be threatened. What's real? My spirit, which comes from unconditional love, not only comes from unconditional love, but is unconditional love. That's my spirit. Right? Wouldn't you agree your spirit is unconditional love, and yours, and yours, and yours? Unless we came from something other than a perfect creation that is unconditional love, then that's what we are. That's exactly what we are as spirit. Now our ego, of course, can't operate at this frequency. Because this frequency is unconditional. Meaning, there is no good and evil that it can see. Unconditional can't see good and evil. Can't be done. No, exactly. This is why we look at things in this world and we say, from a human perspective, how could God allow whatever? God's not loving. Look at this. 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 You know, the world's full of stuff that could not exist if we had a loving God. But it can exist if we have an unconditionally loving God that's not splitting it up as we split it up. That's not interpreting it as we interpret it. That doesn't put the value on it as we put a value on it. That sees a whole different picture. Right? And there's always something going on kind of behind the scenes. And I'm reminded of a play that I saw, not a play, but it was a performance that I saw in Las Vegas, and they had the stage, and they had a curtain, and the people are doing or whatever they're doing in front of this curtain, and then all of a sudden they changed the lighting. Once they changed the lighting, the curtain didn't get moved up or go this way or that way. They changed the lighting, and it became transparent. And all of a sudden there's people behind it, and wow, isn't this interesting? Wow, look at that. So we're watching something and you think you know what's going on, and all of a sudden you find out there's something going on behind what you thought you knew. Okay? This is the difference between awake and asleep. The veil upon the eyes. The veil upon the eyes is giving us an erroneous picture to wrap our minds around based on a judgment, but there's something going on beyond that. We've all heard of God's will. God has a will, ego has a will. Ego has, and these are in opposition to one another.
God has a will,
God has a will. Absolutely, God has a will. Thank God God has a will.
but God's unconditionally loving and totally accepting, so He can't force anybody to do anything.
Can't force you to do anything, exactly right.
So what's,
But God's will
what
is
His
this.
will? What is His
God's will is that you have the opportunity to experience and to choose. That's God's will. And the system of creation will afford you a perfect opportunity to grow spiritually or to say no. That's God's will.
what if somebody called it God's intent?
Okay,
It was an intentive energy and let
yeah,
that.
yeah. Rather than, see, there's a book out called Power versus Force. And yes, when we hear God's will, it almost sounds like, again, if we look at it relative to our human ego minds, it now looks as though we're being coerced into or moved into something rather than giving us freedom to explore. Okay, God's will gives us freedom to explore. It's not saying you're going to have this or else. No, it's saying I'm going to give you opportunity after opportunity after every endless amount of opportunities to reevaluate and stop this. You don't have to. You have eternity to do this. You have eternity. You don't ever, ever, ever have to wake up. But God says, I'm calling you to. You, I think, will find a better experiencing awaiting you if you choose to have this. Try it. You know, and we've done this. I know we've all, at different moments, had a moment where we didn't judge. Right? Where we said, okay, I'm not going to judge this moment. Didn't it shift? Did you feel better or worse? You know, in that moment when you practice unconditional love and you don't judge, everything turns around and you say, wow, where'd that come from? How'd that happen? It happens because God did create a perfect system, and God's intent is that we will wake up at some point. So anyway, at the beginning, the Bible talks about awake, asleep, life and death. We're in the journey of death. The death experience, we're in it. We're having the moment. So where do we go? He knew that they had to go through a purification process before they were ready to once again move into the eternal experience. In other words, once we choose to judge, we need an experience to bring us to a state where we can evaluate the judgment we made. You know, I think wasn't it Newton's law that said once something's set into motion, it stays in motion until it hits an obstacle? Well, that obstacle is experience. We make a judgment, and we put energy into motion. Remember the thought, his thought. That thought goes out into the universe. The thought's out into the universe. Well, it's not going to just keep going forever, because everything is interconnected, and it comes back to us in terms of an experience. What you put out comes back. It has to. And it comes back in terms of an experience. Now, once you have that experience, you can reassess.
So you're pretty much saying every judgment we make is going to be proven wrong, and that's about the only way we can grow, is by running into these obstacles that shows us that when we did judge, we were wrong. So is every judgment wrong?
There's two ways that we can get to the awakened state. Two ways. One is the way that you just described, by playing out every single judgment. Yes, that's one way. Which is exactly what the dimensions of time and space are for. You've heard, I'm sure, that people talk about the various dimensions of time and space. They operate at different frequencies. So there's two things that we can do. And this is one reason why this book is not readily received by the great masses yet. Because I have seen that the vibration in this book is calling people to just wake up. That's what this is really about. Other books are out there, and they're taking people in increments along the way. And most people are not operating at a frequency where this feels right to them.
Right.
What they're
It's
operating
possible
at.
to them.
Huh?
don't think it feels possible.
Not even possible. It's totally out of the realm of possibility for those people
Right.
that are so ingrained in the mindset of judgment and reward and punishment. Okay? Because we don't live in a system of reward and punishment. You're not getting rewarded and punished. No one's going to be punished. And until we can come to a greater understanding that all things are happening out of love.
Most books are teaching us how to make better judgments.
Yes.
Judging this,
Yeah.
this is better,
Exactly.
or the karma will be better. And
Yeah.
And it's all based on judgment, just better judgments,
Yeah.
for deciding between good and evil and rewards and karma and so on.
Yes.
But you're going beyond that to a whole system of just skip the whole judgment thing and just be and create and
Awaken. Just awake. You know, ultimately, if you go through the steps of becoming better and better and raising your frequency step by step by step, where are you going to end up? See, this is why I say, if you want to come to the beginning, back to where you began, let's identify who and what you are at the beginning. Let's see what unconditional love is, if that's the ultimate objective. If it's not the objective, if people are happy to stay here and just be a better human, then go be a better human. You know, I don't have any qualms with that. You know, do it. I know one thing. We can step outside of linear time and we can awaken. We can. We can be spiritually awakened and move into the unconditional loving state that is within us. We can experience that. That's a choice. You can't have that if you're going to become better. One is based on linear, and one is collapsing duality where time and space is now. Einstein made reference to that. He was right. The past, the present, and the future is nothing but a persistent delusion of consciousness. If you can accept that, you could have the experience. If you can't accept that, your thought will not allow you to have that experience. Because your thought and your beliefs are all you can experience. Not one of us can go beyond our own beliefs. None of us. We can change those. Right? I can't change yours though. You can't change mine. I've had many people try to bring me back to being a good Christian so I don't go to hell. You know, we can influence each other, which is what I said before about our media. Our media influences our thinking every day. And you can get a collective agreement. We could get a nation to agree on a certain thing for the most part. But what I'm saying is no one can control another. Not even God. God can't control anyone because it would go against all of the properties of creation. And I said, I don't even remember whether I put it in this book or the first book, but I said, if God interfered with creation,
Oh boy, that would screw it up.
in terms of a judgment, creation would cease to exist. It couldn't even exist. God cannot interfere. And that's why when I say God's will, I like intent a little bit better. God's intent is that you go play and wake up. But there is no control. There can't be. It's impossible.
I got a short story about unconditional love, which is, you know, a fit and a start in one's life. But I work with people who come in off the street up north in Minneapolis, one-on-one. And it's interesting to watch yourself as you respond to that other person who comes in to sit with you on a table. And you'll say something like, well, where have you been lately? Or something like that, just something to get some sense of where this person's coming from. And the guy will say, all right, I just got out of jail day before yesterday. Oh, okay. And you go about talking to this person without giving one twit of concern why that person was in jail. You don't care. It's not an issue. let's go work on what we got here. And it's just as funny to catch yourself doing that. That where that person is, or if you were being judgmental, the first thing you do, well, what did you do that was so bad you had to go to jail or something dumb? You know, ask those kinds of dumb questions. But you don't. You just, oh, okay, fine, and right, go from there.
Yeah, well, one is,
But that's a little fit in the start. I mean, it's just a little snippet of the condition that comes and goes very quickly. But, you know.
and that's the choice that I talked about in here with the mind. When I said, in every given moment, you can react or interact. What you just described was
right.
interacting with the moment
Yeah.
rather than reacting to it.
Exactly.
And this is the some difference between awake and asleep. And yes, in terms of being awake, are we living? Life is going to go on whether you're awake or asleep. Life is going to go on, and you're going to be experiencing. Yes, even in this sleeping death state, you are experiencing. Buddha said all of our pain and suffering is our resistance to life, because life's going to happen. But do you choose to judge it, split it up and judge it, or do you choose to take a step back and interact with it? And the more you interact with life, the more you experience life, because you're experiencing something that's true rather than something that is erroneous. Our beliefs, first of all, because this is all based on a fear-based thought system, which is in linear time, and linear time is an optical delusion of consciousness. Because all of that is based on something that's not real, every thought you have that comes from a judgmental mind is wrong. It's wrong. Every one. Most people say, I'm right, I know I am. They'll agree with me.
Right.
Just because you get agreement in the world doesn't necessarily mean that you're on the right track and you're believing the right things. You know, if you were in a dimension of enlightened beings, I would say yes, by all means, get the general consensus. But know one thing. You're not in a world of enlightened beings. I hate to break it to you. That's not what this world's about. I just picked up the Bible the other day. I do this every once in a while. At coffee the other morning, I opened it up, and I opened up, I can't remember exactly, Luke 14 something, and it had that passage about, blessed are you when people, I'm going to paraphrase, I don't remember the exact verbiage, but it had to do with, blessed are you that people prosecute and speak ill of when, you know that one, when you're speaking truth. Because your reward in heaven is going to be great. In other words, when you're interacting with the world rather than reacting with the world, you're a little bit off from everyone else. Mm-hmm. And you're going to be judged accordingly by the great majority of people. But the great majority of people are not enlightened. I
got a funny story to talk about. If you want to hear the funny story.
I always like to laugh.
Okay, because I was up at seminary in November. They have an annual conference there. And there was a very interesting guy who had been speaking to the huge group of people Friday night and all day Saturday. And he was wrapping up his show and tells on the Saturday event. And when he was just finished talking, I stood up to the whole group. And I said, and what he was just talking about cannot be pulled off unless humanity shifts over to unconditional love. That's something we're going to have to learn. Okay? And then I was going to tell this story about what if I was to stand and talk to this huge room of ministers? And that's who was at the conference, mostly ministers. But I didn't say exactly, I didn't explain it exactly like I intended to. I intended to, first of all, say, if I was talking to a huge room of ministers who were Baptists and Methodists and Catholics and, you know, and all those Christian subsets, and say, go home and start talking to your hometown parishes about unconditional love. And I says, yep, and they would all agree. That's the thing to do. But I didn't say that segment. All I said was, if we had this room full of ministers, but anyhow, and they'll send them home, and I says, on their way home, they're gonna be scratching their heads. What the hell is he talking about? Unconditional love. Oh, God, how would I explain that to somebody at home in the parish? Whoa. And, wow, did they jump up and scream and yell, boy, oh boy, did they get me? And because they thought I was talking about them, that they're gonna go home and then I says, and most ministers, you know, clergy, don't know what the heck unconditional love is. And there's a lady who runs the whole system standing over there screaming at me, and all the other crowd is screaming at me. My wife says, hey, sit down. So I did, and it quieted down. Well, then the next day, we were driving home, and I was thinking about that, and I says, oh, did I prove my point or not? When I said things about that, they could not perceive me in terms of unconditional love, period, nada. And they all their egos got all roughed up and they were screaming and yelling at me. And I was thinking, oh boy, yep, I made my point. Yes.
So they all
And they don't even know it, huh?
They all objected.
Yeah, they don't know.
They were all opposed to the concept of unconditional love.
Not to the idea of unconditional love, but that they
Preach it.
they in the room didn't know what the hell it meant. Is
So
what
how
I
could
was
they
saying.
teach it?
They took it as a personal
They
affront.
took it as a personal affront, yeah. And,
Yeah, because.
Who are you?
Well, when you talk
Yeah.
about unconditional love, people just roll their eyes at you.
well, exactly, because they really
Whatever.
don't know what most people don't have any idea.